gonna say, so like when I'm eating, I set the table for three, even though it's me one, right? How are you, sir? Good, good. Live mic. Morning, good morning.
Press briefing guests and viewers, good morning. At this time, we ask our Zoom guests to ensure that your cameras are off and microphones muted. If not, they will be turned off by the monitors. The briefing is being streamed on the YouTube channel, which is @ the PIOJ. The video will be available for playback immediately after this briefing. When the report has been delivered, pose your questions by typing them in the Zoom chat, or indicate that you would like to speak by raising your hand, and then you will be acknowledged. When called upon, say your first and then last name and the organization that you represent, then go ahead and ask your question. We are also monitoring the YouTube comments section for questions and will put them forward. The briefing is being chaired by Senior Director Corporate Marketing and Communication, Marcia Blake Hall, who will open the session presently. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Ladies and gentlemen of the media and those joining us virtually, good morning. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the April to June 2024 period. Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Research Division, and Mrs. Pisha Lee Brian Lee, Program Director, Vision 2030, Jamaica. At the end of the presentation, as indicated by Gwyneth, we will take your questions. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, and this is based on early information provided by major data providers. The provision of preliminary estimates is consistent with trends in modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final figures are provided. The PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, while Statin releases the official figures at the end of the third month following the end of the quarter. Various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, use the preliminary data to inform critical planning and policy-related decisions. Today, we are reporting that the Jamaican economy remained relatively flat, recording an estimated growth of 0.1% compared with the corresponding quarter, April to June 2023. The outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the normalization of performances of most industries following the return to pre-COVID-19 levels of output in 2023. Specifically, the performance mainly reflected the estimated downturns in the wholesale and resale trade, repair and installation of machinery, and the construction industries, as well as a slowing in the pace of growth in most other industries. The main factors influencing the performance during the review quarter included strengthening of consumer confidence, as well as relatively high levels of employment, which supported increased levels of domestic demand for goods and services, growth in the economies of Jamaica's major trading partners, which supported external demand, and the challenges associated with a fire at Petrojam refinery in March 2024, which negatively impacted production during the review quarter, and a fall in business confidence, as less firms believe that the climate is good for investment. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry grew by an estimated 0.7%, with improved performances recorded for agriculture, forestry and fishing, and mining and quarrying. The manufacturing industry was estimated to have recorded a flat performance, and the construction industry recorded its third consecutive quarter of decline. Agriculture, forestry and fishing. Real value added for the agriculture industry grew by an estimated 2.7%. This outturn primarily reflected the impact of more favorable weather conditions, which contributed to an increase in output per hectare and a 2.4% expansion in the area of domestic crops reaped. The performance of the industry was due to a 3.8% growth in the output of other agricultural crops. Increased production was recorded in 8 of the 9 crop groups, including potatoes, up 9.6%, yams, up 6%, vegetables, up 4.2%, cereals, up 12.6%, and legumes, up 11.5%. And 2, growth of 6.4% in traditional export crops, which largely reflected higher production of sugarcane, up 22.6%, and banana, up 2.4%. These increases were sufficient to outweigh an estimated 15.1% decline in cocoa production. However, animal farming was estimated to have contracted by 2.1%, attributed to a decline in broiler meat production of 2.8%. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry increased by 6.2% due to an expansion in alumina production. Alumina production, the heavier weighted component, grew by 15%. Production continued to benefit from increased capacity utilization following the reopening of the Jamalco refinery. The alumina capacity utilization rate was 41.8%, up 5.5 percentage points compared with the corresponding quarter of 2023. Crude bauxite production was down to 23.7%. The bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased by 11.2 percentage points to 35.9%. Reduced production of most quarrying materials surveyed, and the largest declines were registered sand and stone, gypsum, and pozzolan. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry was estimated to have remained flat. Increased output was estimated for the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry. However, this was countered by an estimated contraction in the other manufacturing sub-industry. Within the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry, higher production was recorded for sugar, up 26.8%, molasses up 48%, dairy products up 22.5%, beer and stout up 18.1%, and carbonated beverages up 12.3%. For other manufacturing sub-industry, the estimated lower output was mainly due to non-metallic minerals, reflecting lower production of cement, down 4.5%, and clinker, down 6%, and petroleum products, mainly reflecting lower production of fuel oil, down 12.1%, ADO, down 19.8%, and turbo fuel, down 53.9%. The lower output of petroleum products resulted from reduced operating days at the Petrojam refinery due to its closure for 38 days relative to 33 days in the corresponding quarter of 2023. There was no production in April 2024 due to a fire on March 5th that disrupted the refinery operations. Construction. An estimated contraction of 2.4% in real value added was recorded for the construction industry, mainly reflecting a downturn in activities in both the building construction and other construction components. Preliminary data on sales of construction inputs indicate a 7% decline in real terms. The decline in the other construction component was due to reduced capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, reflecting National Works Agency down 72.2% to $662.6 million, reflecting lower expenditure on the Harborview to Yallahs leg of the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, and the Major Infrastructure Development Program, MIDP. Jamaica Public Service Company disbursed $1,951.2 million, representing a decline of 21%. Expenditure was mainly associated with construction and installation activities to facilitate the distribution and generation of power. A further decline was tempered by increased expenditure by the National Road Operating and Construction Limited, NROC, of $5.9 billion, representing an increase of $5.2 billion. This was associated with increased expenditure on the Montego Bay Perimeter Road. The building construction component is estimated to have contracted, reflecting a decline of 7.6% in housing starts by the NHT. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 0.1%, reflecting higher real value added for all industries, with the exception of wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, and producers of government services, which declined. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry recorded growth of 2.3% in real value added, reflecting expansion in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption increased by 2.4%, reflecting higher consumption for five of six categories. Residential up 9.9%, general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, up 7.1%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, was up 1.5%. Large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, was up 3.8%. And street lighting plus traffic signals was up 0.6%. These increases outweighed the decline for largest power, that's single locations with a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, and that was down 25.7%. All parishes recorded higher consumption, with the exception of Clarendon and St. James. Trelawney recorded the largest increase, up 14%, followed by St. Mary, up 8.4%. Kingston and St. Andrew continued to account for the largest share of electricity sales at 34.9%, followed by St. Catherine at 16.5% and St. James at 11.6%. Water consumption increased by 1.7% due to a 3.8% increase in the Eastern Division, which accounted for 65.9% of total consumption. And this was sufficient to outweigh a contraction of 2.1% in the Western Division. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for the transport, storage, and communication industry was estimated to have contracted by 0.3% due to an estimated downturn in the transport and storage components. The transport component was impacted by declines in total air passenger movements, down 2%, and total maritime cargo volume movement, down 1.3%. The decline was partially tempered by an increase in the land transport subcomponent, reflected in the number of buses dispatched by the JUTC. The average number of buses dispatched increased by 16.2% to 146 per month. This resulted in an increase of 38.8% to 4.1 million in the number of revenue passengers and 57.6% to $25.7 million in the revenue from charter trips. The storage subcomponent was estimated to have contracted due to a 1.3% decline in total maritime cargo volume handled, reflecting largely a 5.8% contraction in domestic cargo. WR trim. Real value added for the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry, is estimated to have contracted by 0.9% due to a decline of 2.4% in total gross sales. Lower sales were recorded for 6 of the 8 categories, including minerals, fuels, and lubricants, down 4.1%. This category accounted for 20.2% of total sales. Other wholesale and retail sales of goods and services was down 3.1%, and this category accounted for 23.1% of total sales. Hardware, building supplies, electrical goods and machinery was down 8.3%, and this category accounted for 9.3% of total sales. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 1% during the review quarter. The performance largely reflected the impact of increase in net interest income due to a rise in the stock of loans and advances at deposit-taking institutions, and higher income from fees and commission, supported by increased utilization of financial services. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry grew by an estimated 0.1%, reflecting an increase in visitors based on preliminary arrival data. Preliminary data on foreign national arrivals for the review quarter stood at 699,733 visitors, an increase of 0.1% compared with the corresponding quarter of 2023. Preliminary visitor expenditure is estimated to have increased by 1.1% to approximately US $1 billion compared with the corresponding quarter of 2023. And now regarding the employment update, the January 2024 labor force survey undertaken by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, STATIN, indicated that there was a break in the series for the labor force survey, LFS, to incorporate the recommendations from the 19th, 20th, and 21st International Conferences of Labor Statisticians of the International Labour Organization, ILO. The process of revision to the LFS involved amendments to definitions, concepts, classifications, and methodologies. The process also strengthened the quality and accuracy of the data through the following changes, among others: updated definitions and classifications of employment. Employment is now defined as work performed for pay or profit. This now excludes own-use production work, volunteer work, and unpaid trainee work, for example, subsistence farming to provide produce to be consumed at home is no longer considered as work or employment. 2, reference week adjustment. The reference week is now the first full week of the current quarter and no longer the last full week of the previous quarter. And 3, minimum age limit update. The minimum age limit has increased to 15 years, up from 14 years. And 4, rigorous or strict definition of unemployment. The new definition requires an individual to satisfy 3 conditions to be classified as unemployed. 1, absence of employment. 2, actively seeking a job. And 3, available for work. If all 3 conditions are not met and the person is not employed, then that person is classified as outside the labor force instead of unemployed. So due to these changes in the LFS, among others, the January 2024 data is not comparable with the previous reports. The highlights of the January 2024 labor market survey are as follows. The unemployment rate was 5.4%, with male unemployment rate at 4% and female unemployment rate at 7.1%. The youth unemployment rate was 16%, with male youth unemployment at 13.8% and female youth unemployment at 18.5%. The employed labor force stood at 1,405,700 as at January 2024. Males accounted for 53.9% of the employed labor force, with females at 46.1%. The unemployed labor force was 80,700 persons as at January 2024. Looking at GDP performance for January to June of 2024. For the first 6 months of 2024, real GDP is estimated to have grown by 0.8%. The goods producing industry grew by 1.3%, while the services industry grew by 0.7%. The industries which were estimated to have recorded the largest increases during the first half of the year were mining and quarrying, up 12.1%, agriculture, forestry and fishing, up 5%, electricity and water supply, up 4.3%, and hotels and restaurants, up 3.5%. The Vision 2030 update. Now turning to an update on Vision 2030 Jamaica, the National Development Plan. The government of Jamaica has been leading the implementation of the 21-year Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan since 2009. Through the successive 3-year medium-term socio-economic policy frameworks, MTFs, policy priorities are communicated through national and sector strategies. Stakeholders should align their planning to the planned results and strategies in contributing to the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica. Under Vision 2030 Jamaica, the country has been working towards attaining 4 national goals and 15 national outcomes. These national goals are: 1, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. 2, the Jamaican society is secure, cohesive, and just. 3, Jamaican's economy is prosperous. And 4, Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. Vision 2030 Jamaica and its MTF also serve as a vehicle for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Each MTF includes the national outcome indicators, as well as relevant targets covering a 3-year period. National outcome indicators are used to assess the impact of state and non-state programs and other areas of policy-based management. Lessons learned have demonstrated that change at the national level tends to be fairly stable and incremental, with the exception of periods of shocks and crises. Additionally, performance in strengthening systems, processes, and mechanisms for driving development is continually assessed. Accordingly, the MTF includes targets associated with major development programs to monitor performance in producing sector outputs and outcomes. What has Jamaica achieved, and what do we plan to do? 75 national outcome indicators are being used to measure the impact of the country's development efforts. This 75 includes disaggregation by age, sex, and so on for some indicators. The PIOJ monitors the long-term performance of the indicators across successive MTFs to not only determine performance against the current medium-term target, but also trends, whether indicators are steadily improving, declining, or showing little change. Lags in data availability may also affect the measurement of performance against medium-term targets. The national development results are measured against a baseline year of 2007 and medium-term or interim targets that serve as milestones towards the achievement of the 2030 target. For data available up to and including 2021, performance is measured against the 2021 target. For 2022 and 2023 data, it is measured against the 2024 target. Based on the National Performance Measurement Framework, that's National Outcome Indicator and Target Framework, the country's development performance has been mixed. Development gains have been made under all 4 goals, as evidenced by the achievement of some 2018 and 2021 targets, as well as improvement in several of the indicators that fell short of the targets. However, there were also development losses, with some indicators showing slippages or performance at or below the 2007 baseline. Based on the measurement of the most recently available data against 2021 targets, Jamaica has experienced notable development gains across all 4 national goals, with 62.2% of all national outcome indicators being little, somewhat, mostly, or fully achieved when measured against the 2021 target. This is broken down as follows. 25.7% of targets were fully achieved or exceeded. It's 100%. 6.8% were mostly achieved. That's between 80 to 99%. And 20.3% were somewhat achieved. That's between 40 to 79%. 9.5% were little achieved. It's 1 to 39%. And 37.8% were same as or worse than the baseline year 2007 value. That's between 0% or negative. Some of the areas in which the country has advanced include 1, human capital development and strengthened social protection, which include increasing life expectancy, demonstration of improved ability to manage or reduce increases in poverty rates in the midst of crises and shocks, increase in tertiary level enrollment, reduction in adolescent fertility rate. 2, improvement in security, safety, and governance, which include trend decline in serious crimes, that's category 1 crimes, improvements in key governance indicators, including government effectiveness, improvement in the delivery of justice services, such as case clearance. And 3, improvements in the macro-fiscal and business environment, including progress towards greater levels of sustainability and clean energy, including macroeconomic stability, including declining debt to GDP ratio, and a fairly stable inflation rate, which was disrupted due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with recovery recorded over 2022 to 2023. Includes stable economic growth and demonstrated capacity for recovery from crises and shocks, reduction in unemployment to a record low, improvement in labor market efficiency, development of economic infrastructure, increases in the use of non-fossil fuel-based energy, including alternatives and renewables, improvements in research and development, innovation, and improved performance in the Global Innovation Index, economic growth in key industries such as hotels and restaurants, and strengthened capacity for environmental resilience and the quality of social infrastructure. While below target, the country has moved from 0 local sustainable development plans, LSDPs, in 2007 to approximately 4. There have also been areas of insufficient progress and/or development loss, with some overlapping with areas of progress. Some of these include gaps in human capital development and social protection, with undesirable rates of chronic non-communicable diseases, NCDs, poverty, school attendance from early childhood to secondary levels of education falling short of the targets, challenges to security, safety, and governance, with an overrepresentation of violence and a high per capita murder rate by global standards, challenges or gaps in economic growth and competitiveness, including low levels of economic growth, insufficient competitiveness and earnings in key sectors, increasing consumer prices and inflation levels above target, gaps in capacity for environmental resilience and quality of social infrastructure, including a decline in performance to levels considered unsatisfactory in international metrics for environmental sustainability, and less than the targeted number of local sustainable development plans, LSDP. There have also been undesirable rates of tenure insecurity. That is, there are still too many persons without titles to their land. What are the next steps? The main activities being undertaken in advancing Vision 2030 Jamaica include preparation of the 6th of 7 medium-term socio-economic policy frameworks, the MTF. The preparation process is participatory, stakeholder-driven, and underpinned by an evidence and results-based management framework. The MTF will be completed in Q3 of fiscal year 24-25. Includes also an assessment and strengthening of the Data for Development online monitoring platform, which, among other areas, supports stakeholder participation in performance monitoring of Vision 2030 Jamaica. Let me now turn to the short-term economic outlook for July to September 2024 and fiscal year 2024-25. Short-term prospects for the overall economy are negative, largely associated with the adverse impact of Hurricane Beryl on production activities. A downturn in output levels is projected for some industries, including agriculture, forestry and fishing, mining and quarrying, electricity and water supply, as well as hotels and restaurants industry. The agriculture, forestry and fishing industry reported preliminary estimate of damages of $10 billion. The most significant fallout was experienced by farmers along the southern belt, namely the parishes of St. Elizabeth, Clarendon, Manchester, and Westmoreland. These 4 parishes accounted for 54.7% of total hectares reaped for domestic crop during the review quarter. The performance of the mining and quarrying industry was adversely affected by Hurricane Beryl, as a port at Rocky Point was damaged, causing the diversion of alumina exports to an alternative port. It is anticipated that the electricity and water supply industry will record significant damage and loss as a result of the destruction to infrastructure assets caused by Hurricane Beryl. A detailed assessment is still being undertaken as a majority of the recovery work has just been completed. Certain sections of the island were negatively impacted by the difficulty in restoring electricity, which will have implications for production across different industries, not only in the electricity and water industry. The hotels and restaurants industry was impacted by the cancellation of flights and diversion of visitors to alternative destinations due to the passage of the hurricane. The forecast is for a downturn in foreign national arrivals during the quarter. The drag on growth arising from these developments could be partially tempered by upside potential factors, such as improved business and consumer confidence, which could serve to drive domestic demand, stronger than expected growth in the global economy, which could strengthen external demand, and the expected boost in construction-related activities associated with the recovery and rebuilding efforts following Hurricane Beryl. Increased capital expenditure for road repairs, as well as on electricity, water, and telecommunication distribution systems are expected to provide a boost to the construction industry. Against this background, for July to September 2024, it is anticipated that the economy will contract within the range of -0.1% to -1%. This projection is further supported by preliminary data received for July 2024, which indicate downturns in hotels and restaurants, with provisional data reflecting a decline of 7.7% in airport arrivals, electricity and water supply, reflecting decreases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption for the month of July 2024 fell by 13.8% to 265.3 million kilowatt hours. Water consumption also declined by 1.9%. Mining and quarrying. For the month of July 2024, alumina production fell by 23.4%, and crude bauxite production declined by 7.6%. For fiscal year 2024-25, the PIOJ's fiscal year projection is for GDP change within the range of -1% to 1%. So in closing, the preliminary data presented on performance for the April to June 2024 quarter indicate that the performance was relatively flat, and the short-term outlook for the July to September quarter is for a contraction in output, largely reflecting the impact of Hurricane Beryl on industries such as electricity and water and agriculture. Note, however, that for the full fiscal year 2024-25, the projection is more uncertain, ranging from -1% to +1%, and is largely dependent on the pace of recovery from the fallout from Hurricane Beryl. At the negative side of the range, the uncertainties are driven by, 1, the extensive damage in some of the main agricultural producing areas. In light of this, a return to positive performance in this industry may not be recorded until fiscal year 25-26. Additionally, there will be an associated fallout in the RR trim industry, the largest single industry, given the decline in agriculture. 2, there's a potential negative impact of the electricity and water supply industry on other productive activities in the most affected parishes of St. Elizabeth, Manchester, and Westmoreland. This impact is still unknown, as the data and information collection process is ongoing. And 3, the negative impact of an extended fallout in mining and quarrying and the associated downturn on transport and storage activities. Towards a positive side of the range, the projection is predicated on the expectation that the contraction will be short-lived, and there will be a return to positive performance by the October to December 2024 quarter. There is a potential for all industries, with the exception of agriculture, to return to positive performance based on 1, the return to full or normal operating capacities by utility providers, electricity, water, and telecommunication, consequent on the completion of restoration works in the July to September quarter. Also, two, the return to higher levels of operations in the mining and quarrying industry, with the full resumption of operations at a major shipping port following repairs of damages caused by Hurricane Beryl. This is anticipated to result in higher capacity utilization rates. And three, a return to growth in the construction industry, reflecting increased rebuilding and repair activities associated with recovery from Hurricane Beryl, as well as the ramping up of activities under the Relief Emergency Assistance and Community Health REACH Road Rehabilitation Program during the latter half of the fiscal year. Despite the challenges that abound, we remain optimistic as we continue to closely monitor and assess these developments. In closing, I want to acknowledge and thank the very dedicated team here at the PIOJ. I want to encourage us all to continue our collaborative effort and to remain disciplined and responsible as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. May God continue to bless Jamaica land we love. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Henry. We'll now take your questions. Remember to use the raise hand in the chat, or you may prefer to type your questions. I already see someone's hand is up. Mr. Siobhan Wayne from Nationwide, you may go ahead with your question.
Unmute myself. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My question is rather simple. To what extent, or is the PIOJ able to say to what extent the high interest rates over the last, 2 years or so has been impacting the level of growth in the country, which potentially resulted in this flat growth rate for the quarter ending in June?
So thank you for the question, Siobhan. Difficult to say. We outlined factors for the flat performance as we did here. We spoke to the fire at Petrojam. We spoke to the completion of some of the major infrastructure projects, S-CHIP, MIDP. So we spoke to some factors we did not mention. It's difficult to say the impact of the interest rate environment and regime. As you know, there's a policy direction to contain inflation, and the Bank of Jamaica has been elaborating and monitoring in that space. And so we haven't seen any, it's hard for us to say, typically, of course, theoretically, as interest rates increase, it can contract and provide some constraint on the economy. But as you measure in terms of a policy mix and the overall objective of containing price increases, we've seen, and over the years, the quarters before, we've seen growth even in the midst of that. So I, questions like that I would probably direct to the BOJ for that assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Andrew Laidley from JIS, you may go ahead with your question.
Hi, morning everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So my question is to Ms. Pisha Bryan. Is it still fair to say that Vision 2030, that we are on track to achieve everything that Director General Dr. Wayne Henry outlined a while ago in his presentation by 2030? Is it still fair to say that all those things are achievable by then?
Good morning. Thank you for that question. It is fair to say that Vision 2030 Jamaica continues to be the guiding framework for the country and has provided, I think, a measure of stability in terms of how we look at our development process and pathway. However, our data does suggest that the goals and outcomes, and particularly I would say the targets that were benchmarked against developed country status standards, most likely will not be achieved by 2030. I put in this proviso though. When we started the process of long-term national development planning, we thought of getting to developed country status. We at the time made an assessment in 2007 that this could be done within 21 years to 2030. But the intention was to not to be stuck on a timeline, but to be stuck on a pathway and a vision for the Jamaica that we all want to live in, all want to experience, and that one which we know we all can achieve. So I just want to also add that to my response.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. But just as a follow-up, Miss Bryan, I mean, deadlines do exist for a reason, so that we work towards them. So when would you suggest or think might be reasonable to say that these goals that, and these targets that were in fact created by by the Vision 2030 committee themselves might be achievable?
Okay, another good question. All right, so we are the Planning Institute of Jamaica, and I'd say the government of Jamaica is in the process at looking at what we do beyond 2030. So for the next fiscal year, we are planning to commence a process of evaluation. We have already started compiling lessons learned to see what do we need to do, what we've learned from the process to date, and what do we need to do in terms of moving the country forward. So I couldn't give you a timeline right now. It would be a bit irresponsible outside of having those results, but we will keep, I think, the media and the country updated as we go along in terms of looking at what is feasible and what can be done in what timeline.
And just one more question from me for you, Ms. Bryan. Is there any consideration being given to revising Vision 2030 in terms of the targets and the outlook for the country? I mean, given that from 2007, certain things may have changed. Is any consideration given to revising those goals and those targets?
Well, we won't be revising the goals and the outcomes, but we have been looking at the targets. Currently, we are in this particular, I think, discussion. One is you still need to have those original targets to be able to assess the extent to which we were able to progress towards them over the 21 years as part of assessing our lessons learned. But we also have been looking and in developing the medium-term socioeconomic policy framework 2024 to 2027, which we hope to have finished within a month or two. We have been re-examining our 2030 targets. We have been speaking to our stakeholders about what is feasible, what is not feasible, and of course, when the document is completed, those results will be communicated. I will say, though, that there are, for roughly over 60% of our indicators, we have largely been on track. We also have been looking at not just the targets in terms of our performance, but the qualitative data around them. And I'll give you one example. For innovation, for example, we see in the global qualitative data that Jamaica is performing above countries at similar levels of development. But for us as a country, we still feel like we're falling short. So I'm just saying that to say that we're bringing all of those considerations into place. How are we performing comparatively with countries in our development space? How are we performing comparatively with countries towards which we aspire to be in their development space? And what then is feasible, bearing in mind that from our lessons learned, policy, strategy, legislation takes us to a certain level, and then social participation, which means all of us coming together within social contracts, the extent to which we can galvanize the country around particular strategies, policy imperatives to get us to 2030 are all parts of the consideration. As you can imagine, that is a complex process and complex considerations. But as soon as we have the document completed, the current MTF we're working on, that will be shared with the media.
Thanks, Mrs. Bryan Lee. Are there any other questions? Okay, we are not seeing any raised hands or any typing. So I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us and participating in the presentation. Today's presentation will be uploaded to our website and social media pages of the PIOJ and Vision 2030 Jamaica. These are displayed on the screen. Join us again in December when we will present on the performance of the quarter that we are now in. Have a good day and stay safe.